Have you ever wondered about being a guest on a podcast? I know a lot of people are starting podcasts these days, and the other side of it is to be a guest. So I'm super excited to welcome Noemi Beres on our show today. Noemi is the co-owner of the Podcast Connections podcast booking agency. She helps entrepreneurs and business owners share their knowledge and connect them to quality podcast shows. In addition, Noemi is dedicated to helping experts grow their businesses with interviews. She started work in the online marketing field back in 2007. She has a master's degree in Danish literature and language. She's a linguist, content creator, and master organizer. In her free time, she loves making hand-sewn collages on canvases. That sounds interesting. Welcome, Noemi.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Cora.
How did you do that? What are hand-sewn collages on canvas? Tell me a little bit about that before we get into the podcasting stuff.
Yeah, I'm a weekend artist, so-called weekend artist, because I'm pretty busy during the week with our podcast booking agency. But when I have time, I get my canvases, and basically you can make collages like paper collages, paper on paper. But actually, I wasn't saying I discovered this technique, but I love this technique because I don't really like using glue. So that's how I discovered that they are much better and they look better if I sew pictures and small bits and bobs and pieces onto canvas. And yeah, so that's how I made these vintage style collages that inspired by my life and my memories and my past and everything. So but everything is on canvas and everything hand sewn. So it's a lot of work, but it's very relaxing after a long day of work.
Oh, that's exciting. I know that's another thing I like sharing with women, because at this age, we have a little more spare time generally, and we're looking for different things to do. So that's a really cool hobby to have, something totally different. And we're really international today because I normally live just outside Vancouver, Canada, and I'm residing in Mexico for the winter. And where are you these days, Noemi?
I live in Cyprus, the beautiful Mediterranean island of Cyprus in the Eastern Mediterranean, but originally I'm from Central Europe, from Hungary. So it's a long way from there, but we are all over the place.
Yeah. And a lot of women might be wondering, how did you even get started in this podcast agency? Tell us a little bit of your background and how you got there.
My background is online marketing and an online travel related business. That's what we did from 2007 until 2020 when COVID hit the whole world and the travel industry. And then my husband had a mentor from Ireland. We lived in Ireland before Cyprus. And he convinced us that doing podcasting and podcast agents and setting up a podcast agency it's a great idea. So with his advice, and that's when we started our podcast booking agency in 2020. And what I love about it is there's so much connection and so many important connections and networking opportunity in the world. We started with female entrepreneurs only, started to work with female entrepreneurs only, mostly in e-commerce, because we know we need more female voices in the e-commerce industry. That's how we started. But since then, we opened up our palette and we're working with female and male entrepreneurs as well. But it was a great way to start with them, and we had great experience, and that's how it started. In a nutshell, it was a long story short, for sure.
Nice. So, what are some of the benefits? Like, why should someone be on a podcast? What do you think is a benefit for doing that?
Yeah, there are a lot of benefits of doing podcast interviews. Proof in the pudding. We do podcast interviews as well, because it helps us to grow and it helps us to share knowledge. And that's the most important thing about it, is that you are sharing your knowledge and with other people. It's a brilliant networking opportunity because you reach a highly targeted audience. You reach your niche, you reach your people, the ones that are listening. And it's also important to be an authority, generate leads, important leads, and and you build backlinks, and basically you build your brand. And you create evergreen content. which is going to stay there forever. And it's so funny because you can actually try and check yourself if you haven't done podcast interviews before. So you can just type in your name and like podcast or podcast interview, and all the interviews that you've done in your life, they come up, and that's actually great content. It's a great content creation tool in Google as well, and people will find you forever. It's going to stay there. So yeah.
Yeah, I know listening to other people's podcasts, I've heard that before. Somebody will do an interview, or it's their podcast one way or the other, and then months or even years later, they're still getting benefit from something they offered on that podcast. So it's really interesting. And it, like you say, there's so many out there right now and so many different topics. Do you find it's mostly business people that come to you, or is there other things?
No, I mean, we have obviously business people, but we have coaches, holistic coaches, and different kind of clients, and not everyone business people. Some authors, keynote speakers. It depends, because everyone can use podcast guesting for their business and for their goals. So I think anyone can do it. It's also important if you are, if you love doing collages, and if you are an artist, there are podcasts out there where you can share your knowledge about art and how to make art. Or if you do cooking, there are cooking podcasts. So there's loads of them, like 2.5 million podcasts in the world. So there's a podcast for everyone that suits well. And
yeah. That's hard to believe. I know it's a little overwhelming sometimes to look and try and find one to listen to, because there are so many. You hear all the great big name ones, but there's a lot that are not as big that are really interesting. So it's hard to find them sometimes. So, I mean, how do you find the right podcast to approach if you want to be on a podcast? How does that work?
Yeah, first of all, you need to do your research. I mean, there are obviously different tools online that you can use. Obviously, there's Spotify, there's iTunes. And if you, for example, your niche and you know what you're looking for, and you type that particular podcast in, there's other options and other suggestions will come up for you. So there's lots of opportunities opening up once you do your research. And there's also a great tool that you can use, listen notes. There's also a way to do that and to do your research. So first of all, you need to do your research, and you need to know your niche, what you want to aim for, which podcast you are interested in. And then once you find that niche, then you can start to build up your interviews and start to reach out to them. But first of all, researching is really important. That's what we do, like 50% of our time. What we do at Podcast Connections, it's about research. It includes a lot of research to find the right podcasts.
So if you are looking to be on a podcast, you're researching, would you be mostly listening to the podcast? So there's other things. What kind of things would you be looking for when you're researching?
Obviously, you need to listen to a couple of episodes, and that's a great way to get to know the host and get to know the podcast. I mean, that's really important. And don't forget to check out the show notes either, because that also shows a lot of things, what's included in the show notes. Because do the host include your website, your social links in the show notes? That's also important, because that stays there forever. That's good. That's a backlink for you, basically. And it's important information. So, but mostly, I mean, the most important thing is to listen to a couple of episodes, and you appreciate the work, what the hosts do. If you can leave a review for the host, that's also the great gesture. Once you listen to 1 or 2 episodes or 3 episodes, because reviews are important. But first of all, just listen to them and check out the show notes. You can also check out the host website, what business they are doing, what things they are offering. So that's a good starting point.
Okay. And then how do you suggest getting in touch with the podcast that you'd like to be on?
Many podcasts have like their own dedicated website for the show. And there's always a contact page there, or there was an email there that you reach out to the host and get in touch with them. But if they don't have that option, you can always look them up on LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn is like a great, friend of mine.
Yeah.
I use it like every day, and it's a great networking opportunity. And it's a great opportunity to get in touch with the host and just to, send a message and ask them whether they accept. Introduce yourself and tell them you're a listener of their podcast, and ask them whether they accept a guest on their show. And you can just start a conversation just like between humans. I mean, that's just a normal conversation, and we are all humans, so we can start talking.
Yes.
Online.
And I'm sure if it's a podcast that you want to be on, you're obviously going to have something in common, because that's why you want to be on their podcast. That's, a topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any tips for how to do a pitch? I know if they call it a podcast pitch, how to be on a podcast, what kind of things you should include or not include?
If you have a one pager, that's a good thing. So the one pager should include all the important information about you, obviously name, contact details, website, social links, your short bio, and a couple of talking points, topics and talking points, what you want to focus on during the conversation. If you don't have a one pager, you can still send an email including all that information in that email. That's fine as well. And maybe if you did podcast guesting before, just include a link with your previous interview. That's also a good way to show what you've done. If you don't have any, don't be afraid. They might ask for it, but you can just let them. If you have an article that you've written about the topic, you can include that too. So it's pretty flexible. A good pitch is unique. So you can let them know that you listened to a couple of episodes and how you appreciate their work. And it shouldn't be so long. I mean, it should be like a nice, sweet size of an email, because it shouldn't be a lengthy one, because people and hosts are busy, don't have time to read, and they're getting so many emails and messages. So it's just keep it sweet and short, and include all the important information that needs to be there.
Yeah, I think that's nice. And, I guess there's maybe templates people could get online if they wanted to do a one-page application, because I'm thinking that would be a handy thing to have if you're going to be applying for a lot of podcasts, because
absolutely.
When you apply, I mean, when you do an interview with someone, it doesn't mean it's coming out right away either. Lots of guests are working a month or two ahead. So it's good to apply, I would think, for a lot of podcasts, if that's something that you want to do to promote your business or whatever you're talking about, because you might not get accepted for all of them, or it could be a while before the word gets out. So I'm sure it's a process to kind of get that ball rolling.
Absolutely. And one thing I didn't mention, don't forget your headshot on the one pager, because people are visual, and it's a nice way to get yourself introduced to someone with like a nice shot, like a nice professional shot. But you can always do like a professional looking selfie as well. You don't have to spend hundreds on like professional photo shoots and stuff. It's a good thing to do. I don't have either professional one either, but you can do like really cool selfies they don't look a selfie, so you can use the internet for that. So
yeah, I know. I think it makes it seem more real, like it's a person. If there's a photo, I know, when I get a lot of Facebook friend requests, and sometimes people send me a friend request with no photo. Well, I just immediately delete it, because to me, it's like, it's not even a person. So I think that's a really important part with building the relationship. It makes it feel a little more real that way. And then I guess there's following up, when you send those out, like say, as a podcast host, you typically can get a lot of requests, especially if it's a popular podcast. So how do you sort of stand out and follow up without being a pain in the butt?
Don't forget to follow up, because some people think, oh, you are such a pain because I'm sending out these emails and I feel guilty about it. But don't be. Send out, like, usually what we do is like 2-3 follow-ups, and after that you just stop, because there's no point. But it happened before that a host come back to me like after a year that I emailed them. It's like, okay, I got this email from you, I'm so sorry, somehow it ended up somewhere in my email box. And you can always do that. So, but I would suggest 2-3 follow-ups are important. So, and after that, maybe you just stop doing it and just start to look for another one and keep on
Yeah.
going.
So where do you think is your favorite place to look up if someone wants to be on a podcast? Of course, Apple's one of the bigger ones, but where's the best place to look up to find out different kinds of podcasts that you can be a guest on?
I mean, definitely. As I said before, definitely iTunes and Spotify. So I think that works best. But you can also do Google search for things that like popular podcasts or top 20 popular podcasts. Okay, if you start out podcast with podcast guesting, maybe that's not the best way to do podcast guesting, because you have to start from, if you are a newbie to podcast guesting, start from the smaller, middle-sized podcasts, because as long as you are in your niche, it doesn't really matter. You just share knowledge and share everything with people. It's just so important, and it's not about always the popularity, especially if you just start. If you're just starting out podcast guesting. So yeah, start there. Just start listen to podcasts and get into the habit, what kind of guest they're looking for. Check out the previous guest, what they had on, and that will give you an idea. And check out if they had covered the same topic like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month ago, because they won't accept you in that case. So be careful with that, because they can, a host can get annoyed with that. It's like, oh, I just covered that like 2 weeks ago. So obviously I haven't checked my podcast. So yeah. So yeah, just be careful with that. Yeah. Just keep your eyes open and focus on that too.
And so with your company, do you, just to let the listeners know, do you accept people for being guests or for podcasts? Like, how does it work with your company?
Sometimes we have like particular people we would love to work with. So we approach them because we would love to work with them. We do research about them, and okay, that's a person that we would love to have, on our team to work with us. And we have many referrals as well, like from our clients, and they just keep coming, and because of them, and because of referrals and the word of mouth. And yeah, that's how people end up with us. And luckily, I mean, we have people working with us for more than 2 years, and they started together with us, and yeah, we love that. And sometimes some clients, they stop because, especially in the e-commerce world, it can be really hectic in Q4 at this time, Black Friday and everything going on. And then they, in January, they will continue to do guesting, but they're very busy with that. And we are open to that too. We are pretty flexible, and yeah, so we're happy to offer them other solutions as well, and
Great.
Stop and then restart again.
Great. So if someone wants to be a podcast guest and they want to get more information from you, where should they go?
You should visit our website, which is podcastconnections with an S and then .co, not com, .co. And you can always find me on LinkedIn. If you type my name in, Noemi Beres, there's this tiny microphone sign next to my name, and I'm the one with the podcast connections. So you will find me there too. These are the most, I'm on Twitter as well, but these are the most important parts, website and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for being with us today, Noemi. And everybody, if you're listening and maybe have a business or something you want to promote, consider being a podcast guest. There's so many people listening to podcasts. There's millions of podcasts out there right now. So there's something for everybody. And just keep in mind that it's never too late.